help us work. You just heard it's recording in progress. So we are going to record this meeting. The first portion of the meeting we'll record for the information for those people that miss it and can go back and look at it. And we thought that the question and answer may be a little bit more authentic if we did not record that portion as well. So the first part we are recording. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deb.
Hi, I know probably most of you, but I'm Deb Montoya and I'm the fiscal analyst for the Special Education Division. I have met with several districts regarding proportionate share, but I just wanted to, because I've had so many questions about it, I wanted to go over just kind of the main points, main requirements that the district should be following, and just make sure kind of everyone's on the same page. I know that a lot of this is new because I had just redone all of our policies and procedures. So a lot of these requirements I had just found out within about the last year and a half. So I'm just trying to bring everybody into compliance so that we're all following the rules that we should be. With that being said, the definition of parentally placed private school children with disabilities is going to mean children with disabilities that are enrolled by their parents in private, including religious schools or facilities that meet the definition of an elementary school or secondary school. I've got confusion on this because some people are counting the preschool. We do offer the proportionate share for children, basically it's age 3 through 5, but they have to be in a kindergarten. So if there is a student that you have that is 5 years old that is in a kindergarten, that private school, religious school, then that they would count. They would also be counted under both 611 and 619. So that's one of the first things that's given a lot of confusion to a lot of districts. But for the most part, it's going to be the 611. It'll be students. And at this point in time, it's homeschooled students, private schools, religious schools that meet that definition of an elementary or secondary school. Now, as part of the responsibilities for districts, LEAs are required to locate and evaluate students with disabilities enrolled by their parents in private schools under the LEA's jurisdiction, regardless of where they live. They may live in a different state, but if they are attending a homeschool or a private school within your jurisdiction, then you are responsible for proportionate share, counting them for proportionate share within your district. Your child find activities in private schools must be similar to those provided to the public school children and must be provided in a comparable time period. Funds spent on the child find may not be counted toward an LEA's proportionate share expenditures. So each year during the application process is when you will input this information into the application. You will let us know how many students that you have that are privately. You're going to let us know the total child count that are enrolled in the district, and then how many students you have that are attending private schools within your district. Within that, then a certain portion must be reserved and expended on the parentally placed private school students with disabilities within your geographical boundaries. So annually, the LEAs are required to invite the private school representatives to attend a consultation meeting. During this meeting, there are some topics that must be discussed. During that meeting, it's going to be first the child find process. So you will discuss with the parents how parentally placed private school children suspected with a disability can participate equitably, and how parents, teachers, and private school officials will be informed of the process. You'll discuss the determination of proportionate share. So you will let them know how much of the federal funds are available to serve the private school children with disabilities, including the determination of how those funds were calculated. The consultation process. You'll discuss among the LEA, private school officials, and the representatives of parents. We'll discuss how the process will operate throughout the school year to ensure that these students will, that are identified, can meaningfully participate in special education and related services.
Yeah, can I interrupt for just a second? Do you have a slide deck that you're
just notes?
Oh, okay.
I didn't do a slide deck, just notes.
Okay, all right, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm trying not to read, but for the most part, sometimes I just can't help it, so I apologize. You will discuss a provision of special education and related services. So you'll discuss how, where, and by whom special education and related services will be provided for these students. That includes the types of services, including direct services, alternate service, delivery mechanisms, and how special education and related services will be apportioned if funds are insufficient to serve all parentally placed private school children. Also, how and when those decisions will be made. A written explanation by the district regarding services if there is a disagreement between the private school and the district. So if there is a disagreement, then you will basically provide a written explanation as to the reasons why the LEA chose not to provide services directly or through a contract. After this meeting is when this was where a lot of the confusion came into play as well, because a lot of on this new GMS system, you will have noticed that if you did have proportionate share requirements for private school students in your district, that I asked you to upload a written affirmation, the signed written affirmation of consultation. A lot of the things that were, it was the invitation, or I got a lot of the certified mail receipts of mailing this out, but that's technically not the written affirmation. The written affirmation of consultation is going to be after the meeting, where you will have written down everything that was discussed, and it basically will bullet all those topics that I just went through for you, and then signed by the representative saying that a consultation has occurred. Not that there was an agreement on a service plan, not that there was a disagreement, just that this consultation has occurred. If a private school refuses to participate in the meaningful consultation, then the LEA should document all the attempts to engage in this communication, whether it be emails, date and time of phone calls, the certified receipts of mail that was sent to the home. All this should be documented, because if the parents do have a right to file a complaint with WDE if it deems that a timing and meaningful consultation was not provided by the LEA. So you want to just make sure that you cover all of your bases. And if you are trying to get this parents or a private school into a consultation and they just refuse to participate, then you have all that documentation of where you tried.
Deb, can I ask a question? So I think you mentioned it by email, right?
You're cutting out a little bit, so I didn't hear the question.
We don't have a WE form. So is an email going back and forth, is that sufficient to meet the?
As long as all those topics were discussed and they sign that form. Now, a lot of people were asking me for a template, and prior to yesterday, I did not have one. I did provide some of the districts with a redacted copy of some forms that I received from districts that were sufficient. And in that, I ended up finding some archived ones from WDE that I have actually updated. I added a few things to it, and I have it now. And so I will provide that to everybody. Along with I found some other ones that we were going through. So I will put those in a Google folder, or I can send them out to everybody. We'll just figure out the easiest way to do that. But I'm going to share that with all the districts. This form does have I can share it. Should I share it? What the form kind of looks like?
Good.
Share it really quick here. Okay, can you guys see the form?
Yes.
So this is going to be basically what a written affirmation would look like. You can fill
Deb,
in.
now we see your email.
Now we
Oh,
see.
I shared the screen, didn't I? There, is it back on there?
Good.
All right.
Yes.
This form is just going to be pretty basic, where it says right on there, it's the affirmation of consultation. You can fill out the school district, address, phone number, school year, and then the representatives that you're having the consultation with. It states right on here the regulation of the responsibility to have this consultation, and it goes through each one of the points. So you will have child find. And there's a little space on there where if you provided documentation, maybe a calculation, maybe anything with the amounts, you can put all of this information in there. It's got the proportionate share of funds where you'll discuss how it was calculated, the consultation process, the provision of the special education and related services for these students, and then the written explanation if there was a disagreement between the private school and the district. Then it states right on there that this is the written affirmation, and it's got a spot to sign by the district and the representative of private school or homeschool parents. So as long as this, I mean, if you have communication going on by email and you're able to discuss all of these topics and then get a signature that way by email, kind of like the way we do, that would be sufficient.
Okay.
Let me go back to where I was now. How do I stop sharing this? Let's see if I can find it. I don't know what I can do. Oh, okay, there it is. There we go. Okay, so let's see here. So following the consultation, you'll just, the LEA, it's up to the LEA to determine, oops, am I on mute? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear anybody. You guys can hear me?
Yeah,
right?
we can hear you.
Yes,
Sorry about that. So in the end, it is up to the LEA to determine which services to provide. The same IDEA rules apply to proportionate share funds, but you must document the expenditures, keep track of them, everything that's related to IDEA and proportionate share. So in addition to special education and related services, it could be property, equipment, supplies, including technology and supplementary materials may be provided to a private school or homeschool as equitable services. However, they can only be used for Part B, and once they're no longer required, the equipment or supplies must be returned to the district. Transportation can also be provided as equitable services, and it can count towards proportionate share. Now, once you get this proportionate share amount that is required by an LEA to reserve for these students, they must be reserved for proportionate share and proportionate share only. So you cannot, if you don't use these funds, just expend them on other services that are allowable through IDEA. You have to keep these funds reserved through the carryover period. Once you get to the end of the carryover period, if for some reason you are unable to use the funds, whether it was just in excess, you didn't end up needing all of it, maybe the students moved, then at that point in time is where that proportionate carryover questionnaire comes into play. And when you are filling out the application, you can turn that in basically as a request to roll these funds over into just use for the LEA for other expenses that are allowable under IDEA. Now that should be the exception. The main intent is to use these funds for students for equitable services. But if for some reason, of course, WDE is responsible for making sure that the LEAs are in compliance with all the requirements under proportionate share. And if we can't determine that the LEAs are in compliance, then those funds will actually have to be sent back to the federal government and not be used for your other IDEA expenditures. So which is why I'm requiring the written affirmations now. This way I can have my documentation to make sure that LEAs are following all the requirements that they're supposed to be for proportionate share and parentally placed private school kids. And once they are, and we get this documentation into place, I'll just need an explanation as to why the funds weren't able to be used. And then at that point in time, we can allow, for this request for them to be spent on other funds. If that makes sense. Sorry, I kind of mumbled through that one. Now, those are the main points that I just wanted to go over with everybody and then kind of share that form that you can use for your affirmation of consultation. The rest of it, I just kind of wanted to open up for questions if anybody has any.
I have one. Private school, does that include homeschool students? Are they part of that?
At the time being, yes, they are. We had a little bit of language issues that happened with that last year, but in chapter 7, they're working on updating those rules. So at that point in time, I mean, it's not up to us to decide if they're still going to be included in this count, but for now they still are.
Question. Can you spend more than your proportional share?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
In those circumstances, especially if it's a lot, we do ask that you send, when you send over the amendment, you'll have to amend that budget within your budget. And so we'll look at it then, because of course, you just don't want it to be in excess where you're taking from the other funds that are actually from the students that are enrolled in your district.
Question for you, Deb. As far as a student that lives in Powell, has a Powell address, but gets served in a private school in another school boundary, other school district's boundary, who's responsible?
The school district where they are getting instructed.
Getting
So-
instructed. Okay.
Doesn't matter where they live. If they are receiving at a private school or homeschool within your boundaries, then it's your responsibility.
Thank you.
Hey Deb, if we have speech students who come to our elementary school to receive their homeschool kids, but they come to the elementary school for services, do we need to split the funding of the elementary or the speech therapist? Is that what you'd
would-
want to see?
I would definitely do track it. Yes. Have them track, do a time and effort. This way you can see how much they're actually dedicating towards the private school kids. And then you can use that towards your proportionate share expenditures. Because you're required to track those. So,
Track it and have their pay assignments follow appropriately.
correct.
Deb, this is Julie Nash. Just clarifying that I know we can spend more, but are we obligated to spend more? Or once that proportionate share is expended, we are no longer accountable
Nope.
to spend more. We don't have to spend more.
No.
Okay.
And it's completely up to the LEAs, how the districts, how you spend those funds. If you've got 10 kids and you feel that 2 of them require that need more than, I mean, it is completely your discretion on how they are divided, how it is spent.
So just clarifying that again, if I have 3 students and I deem 2 need services and 1 doesn't, I can just say, I can deny the 3rd services because the other 2 need it more.
You can,
Oh, wow. Okay, thanks.
because technically they are opting out of FAPE when they're being homeschooled or, in a private school. So, but we're still trying to provide those services. That's the intent, is to provide those equitable services, but it is up to the LEA in the end. And if you have other questions fiscally related that don't even have anything to do with private school or proportionate share, please feel free to ask.
Just a logistics question on determining the amount of students. Is that based upon the previous school year, the number of homeschool students that were receiving services? The applications due at like the end of June, and we really wouldn't know for the upcoming year at that point in time.
Yeah, it could be the October through December count of previous year. That's actually what is in our manual. But, I'm not too sure on some of the, since this is all new and it's kind of a learning process for all of us. I'm not sure if some of the districts were using that count or using the count because it wasn't specified. So I will make sure that we have more specific instructions next year.
Okay, any other questions for Deb before we move on to kind of an open forum? Okay. Well, the next